House of EdTech, Episode 4.
Hey everyone, this is the EdTech Maestro, and you're listening to the House of EdTech with Christopher Nessie.
Welcome to the fourth episode of the House of EdTech podcast. I am your host, Christopher Nessie. House of EdTech is the podcast that explores how technology is changing the way teachers teach and the impact that technology is having in education. My objective is to discuss the technology that is changing our classrooms and schools. You can count on the House of EdTech for information you can hear about today and use tomorrow. Because whether you use it or not, technology is changing the way we teach and how our students learn. Hey everybody, welcome again to the fourth episode. I just have a couple of quick announcements before we get into today's content. I'd like to let you know there's a couple of new places that you can now get the House of EdTech. You can now find me on the Swell app, and that website is swell, swell.am. You can also follow Swell on Twitter at Swell app. Swell allows you to discover new content and expand your mind while allowing you to maximize your time on the go. If you're not into iTunes on your desktop, you can now subscribe to House of EdTech through Miro, and there's a link to that on my website, mr.chrisnessie.com. And I'm really excited. I got confirmation this week that the House of EdTech is available on Stitcher, so you can now hear my show on Stitcher. For those of you that aren't familiar, Stitcher is radio on demand. So download the Stitcher app for your iOS, Android, Nook, or iPad, and search for House of EdTech, and you'll be enjoying the program wherever you go. I'd also like to give a shout out this week to educationdive.com. They featured the House of EdTech in an article on January 24th titled 5 Education Podcasts You Should Listen To. And the author of that article was associate editor of educationdive.com, Mr. Roger Riddle. So thank you, Roger. I appreciate the very kind words about the program. And you should all go and check out educationdive.com. For this week's content, I got the opportunity to speak to Miss Carina Gonzalez, and Carina is the library media specialist at Lawrence Township High School. So let's take a listen and learn a little bit more about Carina and what she does in her library. And now I'd like to introduce to you Carina Gonzalez. She's the library media specialist at Lawrence Township High School in Lawrenceville, New Jersey. Carina has a master's in library and information science from Rutgers University, the state university of New Jersey. Carina's philosophy is a fantastic one and great for libraries. She believes that librarianship is not about being an antisocial hermit and shushing her patrons at all times. She believes that being a librarian is about service and education. She views the library as a hub of social interaction where knowledge and ideas are freely exchanged and grown. Her primary passions are helping others and, of course, technology. Carina also has a special interest and passion for virtual librarianship and distance learning. She balances her library heroics by being happily married with a beautiful daughter and 2 cute dogs. How you doing, Carina? Welcome to the House of EdTech.
I am fantastic, Chris. Thank you so much for having me.
It is my pleasure. I am so glad that you reached out to me after hearing the first couple of episodes, and I think based on the fact that I should play the It's a Small World theme song, we have a lot in common, from education to technology to almost our family structure and background. And we also have some common people that we know. So I figured I need to bring her on here and meet her, get to know her, and hear what she does with technology in her library.
My involvement with House of EdTech was certainly kismet. I happened to finish the podcast I was listening to at the time. I put EdTech into iTunes, and I happened to find your first episode 3 days after you posted it. So it was meant to be.
Awesome. I like that it came up and you were able to find it. Have you been sharing it with others?
Absolutely. On Twitter, on Facebook. I've been emailing my administrators. They know that I'm doing this today, so I'm really excited.
Nice. That's great, and I really appreciate that. Let's talk about you, technology, and libraries. What makes technology and a library go hand in hand?
Librarianship has always been about information. It's not about books. Despite the fact that many librarians are indeed book lovers, it's all about the information. And right now, information media comes in so many different formats. It's not just a codex or a physical book. You've got ebooks, you've got databases, you've got social software, any kind of crowdsourced information. So in order to be on top of information, you have to be on top of technology. They're the same thing these days.
What are some of the technologies that you get to use in your library?
Besides my databases, my current favorite toy is probably something called RebelMouse. RebelMouse is a new social software that's out there. It's an aggregator of news and content that pushes information directly to a website. And you can add all kinds of things to your RebelMouse. I have my Facebook, my Twitter, my blog. You can add Pinterest. And every time you add to your individual social softwares, it pushes it to the RebelMouse. Combining that with IFTTT and Pocket and Twitter, it can be quite an amazing combo chain of sharing information. And again, librarianship is all about information and pushing it out there for the world to find. So I use it with my students, I use it with my teachers, and with the world at large.
With RebelMouse, is there anything comparable to that? Because that's something new to me that I haven't heard of.
RebelMouse is sort of a combination of Pinterest and maybe Feedly. It can replace a blog if you wanted it to. I use it as an embed for a website. And for those who aren't familiar with embedding, that is a term that we use for web design, which basically means that you're using some sort of third-party software or code that you're putting into your website to make it more interactive, taking your website from 1.0 to 2.0. And for those of you who have used Google Sites, you may have run into the problem of JavaScript blocking. Google Sites does not allow JavaScript for reasons that I won't get into. But sometimes you need to come up with really creative and inventive workarounds in order to get your Google site to do what you want it to do. And RebelMouse allowed me to do one of those things. I kept trying to figure out a way to embed my Twitter feed or embed blog posts from a blog outside of my Google site. And I wasn't getting anything to work. And then I got an email from RebelMouse that they were getting up off the ground. And I contacted them and said, hey, I'm an educator. I want to be a beta tester for you. This is exactly what I'm looking for. You actually work with Google Sites. So they worked with me. They were extremely accessible. They helped tweak my code when things weren't working. They let me do some extra things on the side. They've been absolutely wonderful. And that's why it's a little different than everything that's already out there. Another thing that I liked about RebelMouse that Pinterest didn't do at the time, I believe they do now, but at the time, in order to see someone's pins, you had to be a member of Pinterest. And I am not a classroom teacher. I'm a library media specialist. I potentially have about 3,000 students, not 30, because I teach, if you could hear those air quotes, not only my students, but the teachers in the school and all the parents of those students. So I needed something that didn't force someone to join an already existing service. I wanted something that even if you don't join RebelMouse or Pinterest or Facebook or any of the social softwares that are out there, you can go to my school website and you can get all of that content.
That's perfect, because a lot of what schools and districts and professionals are dealing with is I'm not allowed to use social media in my school or I can't access it. So one of the nice things where I'm at when I was looking up your sites and trying to learn more about what you do and all the great things that are going on for you, those things weren't blocked. So I could see those feeds. Whereas if I try to go to Facebook at my school, I can't. I can sometimes get to Twitter, sometimes I can't. So it's nice that there are tools like RebelMouse out there that, like you're saying, you can aggregate it, you can pull it all together, publish out that content and get it to your people.
I am lucky that I work for a really liberal and innovative school district that is pretty open as far as their acceptable use policies and what students can access. I also have a really great relationship with my IT department. If I come across a software that's new, because I'm always coming up with something new, I just email them and say, hey, I'm using this new toy. Can you add it? And they take a quick look at it, and 9 times out of 10, they say, sure, no problem. Or if they can't, they figure out a workaround. So maybe I'm working on a special project with a student. They'll allow me to access it on just one laptop so that when we're doing that one-to-one interaction, it's supervised access, which they're more comfortable with. But that is a constant struggle for teachers, and it can sometimes go against what we're trying to prepare our students for. I don't remember the exact quote, so I'll paraphrase, but I heard once that trying to teach students to navigate the internet without giving them full access is like trying to teach someone to swim in a pool without water. It's entirely theoretical. You can put swimmies on them and ask them to flap around, but they're not actually going to know how to swim. We are sometimes asking our students to use the internet without teaching them that every single thing that you post online is public and permanent. Even if there's privacy settings, even if you think you're only sharing it with your friends, if someone else can see it, they can take a screenshot and it ain't private anymore. Companies make mistakes, privacy settings change, everything you put online is public and permanent. And without that caution that students have to adopt in order to surf the internet, they sometimes miss that lesson because they're only swimming in safe waters. And if you are in a district that is completely locked down, I feel for you. It's really hard, and that makes your job even harder because getting involved in social software is an additional job that you have to do once you get home.
It is definitely an additional job. I can speak from my own experience that while I haven't always worked in places where I can use technology with the students, it is something that I've been committed to and other professionals want to get into. But like you say, it does take work to use those tools. And if you can't use them with your students, you can use the tools for your professional learning network. If you can't use Twitter to send updates to your students, or maybe you teach in a primary grade level, connect with other teachers, use the tools professionally. And that's, I guess, the next best thing if you can't teach your students how to use the tools.
When I first started, I was an elementary library media specialist. And for me, librarianship is a second career. I have done everything from babysitting to web design to helping people retire for the NJA. So I have been all over the place. But there was always this sort of undercurrent of gadgets and technology. I always had that passion. And when I came to the elementary level, I felt stymied. I didn't know what to do because they were so young. And when you have a kindergartner that is just able to spell their name, how are you going to do social software with that? And it's certainly possible. And there are people out there doing incredible things at the elementary level. But it is a completely different ballgame when you have older students and you have those younger students. And the younger they are, the more things tend to be blocked and the harder it can get. But you don't have to use social software just with your students. Like you said, you can use it as a PLN, Professional Learning Network, or PLC, Professional Learning Community, whatever is the acronym of the day. And I probably use it for the latter more than anything else because, again, not a classroom teacher. Edmodo, not going to be a good tool for me. Any of those LMS learning management systems, not going to be a good fit for me unless I can add 3,000 people. So I use it more as a way to share massive amounts of information in easy and concise ways and share what I have to offer to librarianship, education, and technology with the rest of the world.
With what you're sharing in your library, obviously, like you're saying, you can't have an LMS with 3,000 with your whole school in it. You can't have a 3,000 student class. What are some of the lessons that you do provide on a maybe at the beginning of the year? What are some of the things that you do that you can do with students in terms of technology when they come to the Media Center?
We are a quote unquote Google school. So we heavily use Google Drive. Every single student in the class has a login and account. Teachers are encouraged to do everything through Google Drive and all the Google apps. So I provide workshops for both teachers and the students on how to do that, because knowing how to use Google Drive for yourself is completely different from how to use Google Drive in the classroom. Because if you teach your students how to make all these documents and then say you have a lesson, all of a sudden your inbox is going to be filled with Sally shared this with you, Bobby shared that with you. And all of them are going to be called untitled document, and it's going to be an absolute mess. So we make sure that our teachers set up folders for every single period, and inside of that have a folder for every single student, and inside of that folder there's a folder for homework, or there's a folder for tests, or whatever assessments that the teacher is having. All that is set up ahead of time, and then it's incumbent upon the student to always make sure that they title things appropriately. It harkens back to the old days when you had to save your file with a certain name or it wouldn't work. You couldn't use, spaces or dashes because the file wouldn't work. It's that same concept. If you do not name your paper right, you did not hand it into the correct place. And this prepares them for when they go to college and they have those online courses where you have to submit the document in the right part of the module. If you don't, it's akin to walking into the school, taking your homework and turning it into a paper airplane and shooting it down the hall. You can't do that. You have to walk it to the teacher's desk and put it in the bin. It's the same thing. So that's something I do. I also do regular information literacy. For example, I love making sure that my students doubt everything. I want them to doubt everything they find online. I like to make a 30-second website to prove that a 4-year-old can make a website. It does not require any sort of advanced degree or certification. You do not need to learn how to code anymore. I did when I had to learn how to make websites 10 years ago, but you don't anymore. You click, you edit, you save, you're done. So I usually write in front of them, I make this website that says, new research has found that unicorns are real and they are currently flying over New York City. And then I, post a fake picture, and then I cite it, page created by master's degree certified librarian. And then I hit save, and I'm like, okay, there, look, it's on the internet. It's made by an educator. There's a picture, but it's junk. It's not real. And they get a laugh at that. And then I show them 20 other websites that are creepy yet cool, that are completely bogus, to just get them to doubt. They have to learn how to judge information. And it's not fair. When we did research 10, 15 years ago, and we had a book, that book came to us already vetted by a publisher, an editor, an author, the librarian who picked it, the administrator who went through it, etc. So the student knew that the information they were getting is good. This is good. It is a book. It is good. But now they have billions and billions and billions of bits of data that is thrown at them every time they try to search or research something. And it's not fair, but this is their world, and they have to learn how to navigate it, which means learning how to judge.
Judgment is very important, especially with my social studies background. I don't know if I went into such depth to teach doubt, but obviously teaching how to identify what's a good source versus an unreliable source. So that's all really positive, good things. When you said you make a 30-second website, what tool do you happen to use to do that?
I usually use Google Sites because I already have it up. And it's so easy for me to just have my site up and edit it which is wonderful with Google Sites, because there are other easy sites like Weebly or WordPress that allow you to make free websites. But for example, in Weebly, if you go to the Weebly site that you have, there's no direct edit button. You have to go to Weebly.com and then sign in and then get to it. With Google Sites, you can just edit as soon as you're there. So it's an extra reminder to the students of seeing, wow, this is her live website, and she just clicked a button, and now there's a new page, and now there's a new, extra site added on, and she hit save, and there, it's already added in.
In addition to Google Sites and Google Apps, which I'm jealous that your school and is your whole district Google-fied?
Yes, we're Google-fied.
Okay. When teachers come to you, what are some, obviously if they want to go beyond Google, what are some of your favorite tools that, the science department comes to you and has a question about? Maybe it's research or presentation. What are some of the favorite tools that they'll come to you and that you'll recommend?
Well, that would take another episode for me to list everything. So I have
what are your favorites?
Right, where I curate that content, and I use something called Keeb. It's KEEEB.com. It's another new company. It's a German company. They're pretty much just out of beta. And I have over 4,000 websites, apps, and resources that I keep there. Every time I find something interesting, I stick it in my Keeb. Keeb is similar to LiveBinders, also like Pinterest or 2Clicks or some of the other programs that are out there that allow you to collect and bookmark online content. But again, and this is very important to me, the non-classroom teacher, you do not have to join Keeb in order to access any of the information. So I have a science Keeb. I have an apps Keeb. So if somebody came to me and said, I'm looking for something new for my students to play with for presentations, I would send them to my presentations Keeb. Right now, I've been recommending LucidPress because we're also a Chromebook school. So, yeah, I know, I'm lucky. I am so lucky. My district is awesome. We are a one-to-one district, and currently half of our students each have their own device. It's a district given Chromebook, and we are what I like to call BYOD light. We are not full-blown BYOD because we recognize that the user experience on an iPad is going to be completely different from the user experience on, the latest HP laptop. So students are certainly welcome to bring in their own devices, but they are not required to. It's an addendum to the one-to-one initiative. So if I have a teacher that comes to me and says, hey, I want to do a presentation, but my kids are on Chromebooks, LucidPress is a great Chromebook extension that they can make newsletters, presentations, etc. LucidPress just announced, though, that they are exploring pay options. So that might not be a free tool for much longer. So teachers, if you want to give it a try, now's the time to jump on that.
Yes, as we all know, free is my favorite thing to recommend, and I always hate when something adds a dollar sign to it. This has been a really good conversation. I know I said I would only keep you 15 to 20 minutes. I think it's almost been a half hour. So I do apologize for taking up so much of your time, Carina. How can people get in touch with you? Where, besides your library content and what you do for your school and your district, how can people connect with you?
One of my byline is virtually everywhere, because I really am. The easiest way to find me is I use something called about.me. About.me is really great if you are terrified of websites. If you want to create your first website, it is only one page, it is free, and it's a great portal for your online presence. So it's also really great if you're looking for a job. It's a good substitute for an online resume. So if you go to about.me/Carina Gonzalez, you will find my LinkedIn and my Twitter and my Facebook and my Keeb and my RebelMouse and my blog, all the ways that you can contact me.
Awesome. I am definitely going to continue to check out. I want to look at RebelMouse. I need to look at Keeb. And for everybody listening, there will be links to all of these great resources that Carina shared in this week's show notes. I need to thank you for taking the time. It was a fantastic conversation, and I will definitely have you on again to talk more about libraries and technology.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really great to give libraries and librarianship a voice. People need to know that librarianship is high tech now, and we are loud and we are proud, and a happy library is a loud library. I look forward to coming back and talking to everybody again.
Awesome. Thank you, Carina, for being here, and we will definitely talk to you again soon. Now let's get into this week's EdTech Thought. I'm also combining this with my EdTech recommendation. This episode, I'd like to talk about backchanneling and backchanneling in the classroom. What is backchanneling? It's basically a way to document and record what's happening in your classroom during a lesson or throughout the course of your day with your students, and your students are directly involved. It's a great way to take notes or to basically log what's happening in your classroom for future reference if you need to look back for students that are absent, or if a student has to miss part of the class, they can come back in or go back later and see what was happening. Backchanneling is a great way to get questions asked during a lesson without stopping the lesson, but students can record what they're thinking and what's on their mind during the learning, which is really great if the teacher isn't getting interrupted. It kind of minimizes that. The tool that I'd like to recommend for backchanneling is Today's Meet. Today's Meet is a free site that allows you to create basically a chat room and invite people to join your chat. To create a chat room, you just go to todaysmeet.com, todaysmeet.com. And it's really simple. All you have to do is give your room a name. Let's say in an example, we name it Mr. Nessie period 1. No spaces, periods, or any other characters. You decide when it closes. And these chat rooms can be open from as little as an hour all the way up to a year. And then you simply click your room. That's it. And your Today's Meet room is created. Each message entered in Today's Meet is 140 characters, just like Twitter. So it also forces your students to be more concise with their words. And even yourself, if you want to post thoughts or notes and other information for students to read. I would also like to share some uses for Today's Meet that you can do in school. The following are ideas that originally appeared on ditchthattextbook.com, which is hosted and run by Mr. Matt Miller. Matt is a high school Spanish teacher from West Central Indiana, and you can follow Matt on Twitter at jmattmiller, MattMiller. Matt's original article on ditchthattextbook.com listed 20 different ways that you can use Today's Meet in the classroom. I'd like to share with you a couple of the highlights from his 20 uses list. The first, have a conversation. Students can talk about anything in a Today's Meet classroom. And often, you can draw out the shyest and quietest students using this type of technology, the ones who would never raise their hand in a class discussion. So it's great for the shy ones. You can allow your class to participate in a poll. You can ask for a vote among a couple of choices, and then the results will be visually obvious in a matter of seconds as your students respond to questions through Today's Meet. You can also quickly gather feedback. Did your presentation make sense? Do students like the changes to the school? What is really working in class? What would they like to see more of? Simple questions that you can send out to your class that you can get immediate feedback on. You can discuss an event. Maybe it's most recently the State of the Union address, a movie relevant to class, a presentation in the auditorium. You can host a behind-the-scenes quiet discussion. It's also really cool that this classroom, or really this chat room, is open and available to your students outside of class. So maybe you can have them, if you're trying to do some little flip techniques, have them post questions outside of class that you can check in the evening or before that class arrives the next day. And you've already got questions and you're ready to kind of access their prior knowledge and see what they're coming with and what questions they have on a particular topic. You can also use today's Meet to connect with other classrooms. Extend the discussion beyond the four walls of your classroom. Invite a class down the hall in another city or even from a different country, and you can now have your students interacting on a global scale. You can facilitate group projects this way. Once you show students this technology, now they can use it in not only your class, they can use it when they're doing group work, where they can now collaborate and discuss a project they might be working on. They can also take it with them as they go forward and use it in maybe their other classes. And as they go forward, if you're teaching, say, middle school students, and now they're now aware of today's Meet and can make use of this technology going forward. You can also use today's Meet professionally. You can host a discussion with your colleagues and discuss professional topics. Maybe you do professional learning communities in your school, or you have common planning time. Post questions, lesson plan ideas, links to resources, and conduct today's Meets with your colleagues. You might even want to suggest it to your building administration. This technology would be really useful for faculty and staff meetings, where your colleagues and other professionals can post questions about what's happening in the school. Your principal can address them either through maybe a weekly email, or if the questions are posted before faculty meetings, the principal knows what the hot topics are and can have a better sense of what's going on in the building. So I suggest you check out the rest of the list at ditchthattextbook.com, and I'll have a link to that in the show notes. So if you haven't considered backchanneling or using technology like Today's Meet in your classroom, I suggest you head over to todaysmeet.com and try it out. Open up a chat room for an hour, do it with your wife, husband, try it with your own kids at home, play with the technology. Today's Meet is really easy to use, and I think your students will find value in it. And if you can get there, other colleagues will also find value in it too. So check out todaysmeet.com and try and introduce backchanneling into your classroom tomorrow. Let's meet this week's House of EdTech VIP, Mr. Steve Figarelli. Mr. Figarelli is an employee of the Edison Township Public Schools here in New Jersey, where he's been for the last 10 years. His work at the local and state level has been consistently grounded in the infusion of 21st century learning and technological trends, classroom management, meeting the needs of a wide array of learners, and using data to drive instruction. Steve is one of the organizers of the first #EdTechNJ conference, which took place last October, and I had the pleasure of attending and presenting at, and Steve and his team did a fantastic job over in Edison. Steve also employs his expertise in the areas of professional learning communities, inquiry-based dialogue, and new literacies. Steve's activities and accomplishments in the field have grown to encompass every aspect of the learning experience. Steve has facilitated multiple professional development workshops with a concentration on student engagement, research-based instructional strategies, educational technologies, and professional dialogue. I heavily recommend that you follow Steve on Twitter at Mr. Figarelli, Figurelli, for great EdTech and instructional resources. You should also check out Steve's Digo Public Library. And for those that don't know, Digo is an online catalog with hundreds of interactive web resources for teachers to use in the classroom. And his Digo is digo.com/user/sfigarelli. And Digo is DIIGO. So check out Steve Figarelli, this week's House of EdTech VIP. And that's going to do it for this episode of the House of EdTech. I am Christopher Nessie. Keep the conversation going and visit my website, mr.chrisnessie.com. You can check out the show notes for this episode at mr.chrisnessie.com/2014/02/houseofedtech4.html. If you have a question or a comment that you would like me to address on a future episode, I encourage you to send me a voicemail, which I will feature on the show. You can click on the SpeakPipe button on my website, or you can call my Google voicemail at 732-903-4869. You can also email me at nessie.history@gmail.com, or tweet me your comments or questions at Mr. Nessie, and use the hashtag HouseOfEdTech. If you enjoyed today's program or the previous episodes, I'm asking you to please rate my podcast in iTunes and even write a brief review. Your 5-star rating and positive review will help get this show in front of people who haven't seen it and might enjoy what I'm doing here. Thank you for listening, and remember, using technology isn't difficult. Just give it a try.